I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. I think as everybody who sits in this seat does, it's just something about watching people coming in and the Sangha that we are as we meet from all these different places across the world. So we'll start with 10 minutes of sitting and just letting yourself rest into exactly where you are right now. As you find your body arriving, your mind or your heart, I just wanted to share something that Sylvia Boorstein quoted from her friend Ajahn Amaro as a possible invitation for today. Let the mind and body assume the natural peace and ease that are the natural peace and ease of the natural body, and let it stay that way. Let the mind and body assume the natural peace and ease that are the natural space that you sit in. When you notice anything that disturbs that natural peace, notice it. Settling into and trusting the natural peace and ease that the body has and wants. And even if that seems far from your lived experience in this moment, just knowing there is natural peace and ease in the body. Let's join together and say, vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Last week, Laurie was talking about the urge to leave, to run away, and I was thinking about coming home. So I was thinking the idea of if it ain't paradoxical, it ain't true. So there's both running away and there's coming home, and that's kind of going to be the theme of what I'm talking about tonight. And it started with a sort of experience, something I was reading. So there are a few artists, and this may really be true for you too, whose work has literally stopped me. You know, I'm walking around an exhibition or something and finding something that kind of completely stops you and produces some sense of stillness or connection, or like you're seeing something you didn't know you needed to see. And for me, there's been a few artists like that, and I can think of seeing exhibitions by Paul Klee when I was really a lot younger, and Rothko, and then more recently seeing some amazing video work by Bill Viola, whose work seemed to be about time and presence. I was really struck by it, and the images have kind of lived on in the back of my retina for some time. And so where he died recently, and I was reading an article where he was interviewed about his practice. And he said, we all contain natural propensities within ourselves, lying dormant, like seeds waiting for the right conditions in order to sprout. And part of the effort in life's spiritual journey is to get yourself to the right place so that the fruit can grow by itself. Isn't that lovely? Just to get yourself to the right place sort of reminds me of that idea of making ourselves fetchable. That life's spiritual journey is simply to get yourself to the right place so that the fruit can grow by itself. Ibn Arabi, the 13th century Sufi master, said, if you engage in travel, you will arrive. And I was thinking, where is it we arrive at? Where's home? What do we mean? What do we mean by home? And this so chimed with things I've been thinking a lot about recently, which is also fueled by reading a book called The Road Home, Buddhism for the 21st Century by Ethan Nichtern. And he says, we are each a subject, one who exists and perceives objects of experience within the space of our lived awareness. When a subject can't feel at home within its own subjectivity, he has no choice but to attempt to solidify home by grasping for safety out there. When a subject can't feel at home within his own subjectivity, when we don't feel at home within our own lives, we have no choice but to attempt to solidify home by grasping for safety out there. As I initially started writing the draft for this piece, I was not in my actual home, but I was staying in a beautiful cabin amongst some trees in Devon. And it's a place we've stayed at a few times before after I've been down there working. I'd been leading a Hakomi residential, and we go there for some space and quiet. And the view out over the trees into the pasture further afield and the wide sky feels really familiar to me, and I feel at home there. And of course it isn't my home, it isn't home for me. The birds and the trees have made it their home, as well as the innumerable small creatures you can see and hear scurrying about there. And there's a particular bird with an incredibly beautiful liquid song, and you can hear it throughout the day, and they're called blackcaps. And they're visitors, they're summer visitors from Europe. And I was reading about them because I was so intrigued by their beautiful song, and I found myself wondering where home was for them, because it's usually and historically has been a summer visitor from Eastern Europe, from the cold. But with climate change, it means it's also starting to winter here in the UK. And I thought, where's home for a blackcap now? You know, if it's not a migratory bird, what does it become? And there was something about that sense of how we might get kind of dispossessed from somewhere we thought of as home. And while I was away on the residential, I was talking to some people who didn't know me that well, and they asked me where I'm from, and I have a very familiar, as I'm sure many of you do, a kind of pat response, you know. So my little pat response is, I'm from Liverpool. And it's usually met with some confusion, because if you know, Liverpool's often associated with a really strong accent. And I don't have a Liverpool accent. And again, I've got a little story I can kind of trot out about that. My sort of familiar refrain would be to joke that my London-born mother, you know, found the Liverpool accent absolutely horrific, unbearable, in fact. And I wasn't allowed to say luch or book or wash me air. I couldn't do my Liverpool accent when I was at home. So I kind of never felt my way into it. And in thinking about home, I kind of found a slightly different angle on my familiar story, which was, I thought of how dispossessed she felt, trying to make a little sanctuary for herself of Southerners, you know, with people who did not want to be Southern. And she felt her Southernness a lot in Liverpool. And I was thinking about how not at home she felt. And she wasn't at home. And I've never really worn my northern roots with pride, because they weren't nurtured with pride, but rather denial. So as a child, for this and other reasons, home was not a place that I actually felt fully at home in. And I'm saying these things which are personal to me, but I think they might find some resonance for people about being somewhere that looks like home, or you call home, but perhaps isn't home. And one of the things for me in practice is this idea of taking refuge. Taking refuge. And much of my life and practice has been about coming home to myself, to the me that I am. And I've always understood the idea of taking refuge meaning to fly back, to fly back. And the dictionary also points to it being a place itself, a place of safety, a place of sanctuary. So what might it mean for us to take refuge, to fly home, to find a way home into the triple treasure, when perhaps for many of us we don't feel at home in our bodies, our histories, our culture, our place of birth, the place we currently live in. I read a beautiful piece by Zenju Earthlyn Manuel where she was reflecting on what it's like to be dispossessed of your history, your culture, your name. She talks about her time of being actually homeless. She says, without our true names, it's difficult to consider anywhere home. The destruction of tribes, names, lands, cultures, languages and truths, and the absence of documented lineage are a large part of our struggle. And here she's obviously talking about the diaspora and people who've been forced to move from one place to another, as there are many now across our different worlds who are arriving without their own histories, without their language, without their own sense of belonging. She goes on to say, home cannot be an experience of shame, terror, or rejection, but rather one of safety, freedom, and respect, an experience of love and being loved, of being known and knowing who you are. Incredible definition of home. It's not a place of shame, terror, or rejection, but one of safety, freedom, and respect, an experience of love and being embraced, of being known and knowing who you are. And I think some of us will have had that real experience of coming into the Sangha, and because of some of those qualities of being seen and being known and being loved and respect, we find ourselves feeling at home, even as a 2-inch image on a screen. And when we talk of taking refuge, we're leaning into this ancient tradition of finding home. Buddha himself left his palatial home because, having seen the marks of existence, he no longer felt at home, and he wanted to discover the home that could not be lost. And again, Zen Evelyn Manuel talks of homelessness, which is rooted in her actual experience. And she says, homelessness is like walking in a dark forest step by step. It's an initiation. Feel into the mystery, not knowing what you may touch. In this way, homelessness can be the beginning of a new life, even when it feels like the end. In the midst of an initiation, how you see life is tested, and if you are open, it will transform you. And I thought she's talking about the very real experience of losing her physical home, but I thought actually so many of us start through the Dharma gate of homelessness, of that sense of being unhomed in our hearts, unhomed in our bodies. And I know that for many of us, and I would certainly be in this particular category, many of us adopt for safety Groucho Marx's famous quote when he was said in his letter of resignation from the Friars Club, "I don't want to belong to any club that would accept me as one of its members." And I think many of us approach community in much similar ways. If you're prepared to have me, I don't want to belong. And of course it's a safety mechanism. Of course we are all terrified of rejection. We're also terrified of belonging quite often. And we think we have a choice about belonging and home, or that other people exercise a choice for us. And when we experience ourselves as separate from the world, then that is how we experience our lives, as being never or rarely fully at home. There's a beautiful song by K.D. Lang, one of my, again, favourite artists, and it's called Outside Myself, and the words have often echoed for me, especially in my work as a therapist. It's felt like people's lived experience. And the line is, "I've been outside myself for so long, any feeling I've had is close to gone." And I think some of us will know that numb way of living, so that we've been outside our own experience for so long that you don't even know quite who you are or how you are inside. And the work of coming home to ourselves, the work of sitting in Zazen, the work of turning towards, taking the backward step, means coming home to ourselves, means we have to find the courage to return to the home And for many of us, the home can initially feel like it's been overrun with squatters, or fallen into disarray or decay, or you don't know how this thing works. And I was laughing about this because I was thinking we've been fortunate enough to live in our own home for a really long time. And there are some plugs and sockets that I don't know what they do. It's like, we've never touched them. And I don't even know what they do. I've lived here for a really long time and I still don't know how it works. Anyway. But Katie Lang also really refers to this longing we have, the longing we have to come home. She says, "The thin ice covers my soul, my body's frozen and my heart is cold, and still so much about me is raw. I search for a place to unthaw." And we all search for a place to unthaw, I think, to reconvene, to find solace, refuge, safety, company, love, home. It says in the Abhidharma, the Buddhist psychological teachings, the body is called the soil in which understanding grows. Isn't that lovely? You've got soil in which understanding grows. And I think that for many of us, just learning to tend with love and care and tenderness this oft untended soil is the beginning of coming home to joy and connection. Norman Fisher says, the human body is not an object in the world, it is a magnificent process. Did you know you were living in a magnificent process? A flow, a ceaseless flow, a journey in itself, without intending or thinking about it. And he goes on to enumerate all the ways that your body just does its thing to get you through the world. And there's a little piece from John O'Donoghue who says, "You have travelled too fast over false ground. Now your soul has come to take you back. Take refuge in your senses. Open up to all the small miracles you rush through. Become inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls slow and free. Imitate the habit of twilight. Take time to open the well of colour that fostered the brightness of day. Draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. Be excessively gentle with yourself. Be excessively gentle with yourself." Norman Fisher says, meditation is not what we think it is. It is not peacefulness or bliss or even a technique for insight or enlightenment. In its widest sense, meditation is an open and creative way of returning home to ourselves, a way in which the mystery that we actually are can have its full expression. The journey of our return involves not only our so-called spiritual lives, but the whole of our lives. Meditation practice is at the center of the journey of return, fueling and inspiring us. And Reb Anderson says, if taking refuge is the return flight to our own true nature, the appeal is not made to something outside of ourselves, nor to something inside of ourselves. It's an interesting idea, isn't it? It's not made to something outside of ourselves or something inside of ourselves. It's made to the great openness of being that transcends outside and inside, and from which nothing is excluded. Danin Katagiri Roshi has a beautiful piece he called Make Yourself at Home, and he talks about letting things be where they are. He quotes the instructions for the cook from Dogen Zenji, saying, put those things that naturally go on a high place onto a high place, and those that would be most stable on a low place onto a low place. Things that naturally belong on a low place, find the greatest stability there. When we can place ourselves into our lives, letting ourselves be just as we are, and agree to join the club we have always been part of, then we find our space, we find our home, that's neither inside or outside. And this felt like such an echo from the piece from Bill Viola. Part of the effort in life's spiritual journey is to simply get yourself to the right place so that the fruit can grow by itself. And then there's quite a long piece from Katagiri Roshi, which I do want to read. He says, but when things are placed where they ought to be, that is, if you just allow them to be what they are, they very naturally start to talk with you. Not to you, with you. You feel at home in the wonderful space you have allowed to happen around you. This is what Dogen is saying to us. Both night and day, allow all things to come and reside within your mind. Allow your mind and all things to function together as a whole. We can't have close communication with our objects if they appear as separate beings. We should move towards them. In other words, allow things to come up to you and reside within your mind. This is throwing yourself into the home of Buddha. Buddha's home is where all objects are placed just as they are. It's the natural world we find around us. Just return home and reside there in peace and harmony. And I love that phrase, throwing yourself into the home of Buddha, which is the place, this here, this now, this exactly where we are right now and where we've always been, which is home. And as I was thinking about all of this, I was thinking, sometimes we're thinking about coming home, but I've also been thinking about us being home, that we are home for others. We're home for, I think, thousands of microbes that live in us and on us. I think our eyelashes are full of them. You know, we are a little universe ourselves. We're home to so many things, a whole ecosystem walking around the earth. And we're home to the wisdom and love of others and all the experiences that we had. We're home to the histories of our ancestors, to our loves and losses and friendships and successes and failures. We're home to all of that through the world. When I was sewing my rakusu, I recited Namu Kibutsu. I plunge into the life of the Buddha, and I would imagine that the Buddha was also plunging into my life. We are home for the world, and the world is home for us. I'd just like to finish by reading one of my own poems called Painting a 100-Year-Old House. We've lived in this house for over 30 years, and sometimes I forget and think it's mine. Then, as the chalky paint glides over the rippled plaster, I'm minded of all the other people who have lent their efforts and hopes here, whose voices echoed with pleasure and pain, whose names and lives I will never know. And how I don't know who in the future will occupy this, my house. Then the radio reminds me of the terrible situation in Ukraine. Other walls, lovingly decorated or hung with treasured pictures. Homes, their homes. Now no longer even here. Homes now belonging to nothing and nobody, only violence's aftermath. Then I take a breath and remind myself, this house, it's not mine, never mine, but always ours, and not yours, never yours lying in the rubble or abandoned for dangerous safety, but always ours, always ours. Oh, thank you. And I'd love to meet anybody who would like to explore home or anything else. Hi, Jeanette.
Hello, what a joy to be with you. I find you a home. I Something is moving in me about the relative and the absolute, and all of the homecoming you kind of vibrated around us and through us. It feels like, so there was this, after a particular traumatic death in which like everything shattered my whole life, I had this moment where I just felt in my heart that I really just experienced that I could go anywhere in the world with a blanket and maybe a little statue and a bowl, and then I could be dropped into a country where I have no idea what the history or the culture or the language is, but if I reached out to someone's heart, their heart would come to the surface, and we would be flooded with that oneness. I didn't experience it for very long. I'm just wondering why or how is it that I can experience something like that on the precipice of death or in the wake of total shattering, but not in my quotidian life. I struggle with this.
It's well, thank you for your teaching. Beautiful. And yeah, me too. I think those moments of extreme openness, and they can open us to terror, of course, and separation, but I think they're also real gateways to connection because everything falls away and we suddenly find what's left, which is what's always left.
It was more than I could possibly have imagined. I felt like everything had already happened to me. There was nothing, I didn't feel fear at that point.
Yeah.
I felt complete connection. And I have, like you said, when we hear a song or stumble upon a piece of art that just stills us or moves us, it's like something you can't unknow, something that was in there that's been revealed. And I can't unknow those experiences, but I wonder from afar at them now.
But even as you're speaking to me, I think you can have some sense of the connection to them. Like, yeah, and that's why we need each other, and that's why it's called practice, and it is something about, yeah, we don't live our life in those peak places, but they never go away. You know you belong anywhere.
I don't think I belong anywhere, but there's something in me that goes way beyond I, that is connected to all.
Yeah.
It was losing the I that liberated me. That was such a relief. All the limitations, my doubts and fears and corners and walls.
Our contracted self when that falls away. And you just keep teaching us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ra.
Me a very long time to find my hand there. And then you
Just
do.
there.
That was a bit jam-packed, that talk,
Yeah.
with so much richness for the soil. Yeah, so much and so many quotes. That I
You
have
know me.
no idea what they were now, but they somehow what I'm with is they spoke to um, this something I'm with around. Can I just uh, can I include it all?
Yeah.
Um, it's like I've spotted in myself. It's more subtle, but I've spotted in recent weeks this because I was enjoying a kind of sense of freedom from myself and
Mm.
um, oh, it's like the how relieving that is that oh, not a whole lot going on here, and just living and responding. And then I spotted like that part that still wants a formula for it and wants to understand like, well, how did that come about? Um,
Like, how do we make that happen?
yeah. How can
Yeah.
I stay here? Because this feels a whole lot better.
Yeah.
And then of course I I have this experience of oh more dull again.
Mm.
And it's like yeah, how to include that,
Mm.
you know, s- still like some access to something that's much more free and dull, you know. It's like really, but um yeah, how like it feels really potent, like the not preferencing,
Yeah.
um and how I'm doing that, and something like the dull, what the sense of what happens is then there's this grapple with not like that's that's the contrast. Then there's this grapple with not wanting this, and
And
it's not
preferring
what's
not to
happening.
grapple.
Yeah, and not
Yeah.
being able to include the grapple.
Yeah.
The grapple in itself is just happening in the freedom. Really, it's just grapple.
Just grapple. I was thinking, there's a part of me that's just going, and the problem is,
Yeah, somewhere something becomes a problem, and then it all goes a bit dull, um and then it becomes about me again, about some oh, and it's just a lot of your quotes there and what you were saying just felt like home is the richness of it all,
or
really. um
everything in its place, and what's in its place is, like Geneva was saying, like the quotidian life, the contraction, the self-centeredness, and the flow, the constant flow. And I was thinking, it really is why we practice together, because we need reminders. We do it in company.
mm,
You know?
mm,
Your grapple is friends with my grapple. It's like
mm,
this isn't a separate thing we struggle
mm.
with.
No, that's really it, isn't it? It
Yeah,
so is.
yeah. We're not each in our little corner trying to perfect the home, the place. Home is all of this and all of us.
Mm, mm. It's kind of, like right now I have the tickle of it. It's like it's kind of funny. And
I,
sometimes it really doesn't feel funny.
I think we're trying to stop my English swearing. I think we're really hilarious
Yeah.
and painful and tragic, but it's, yeah,
And it goes on, and quite reliably.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? Everything's permanent except the grapple. Maybe that's impermanent too.
Mhm. But yeah, thank you. I'm definitely wanting to listen back to. Yes. Um, yeah.
And something about, that the Ram Dass, we're all just walking each other home. It's like we're all at home, calling each other home and calling each other home. You know, you're home.
I was listening to you and thinking, I've kind of felt at home in myself
Mm.
since I was little. You know, I have.
Mm.
I haven't felt at home in the world. That's
It's
much more.
interesting that you think they're separate.
I know. But, you know, in the.
What are you designating as the outside world?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. As you know, as a kid, I didn't feel welcomed into the world, but I felt a real refuge somewhere in the quiet. But yeah, it's that whole exactly what you just said. That's the practice, as if
Mm.
I'm separate,
As
as if
if
I'm
you.
part of everything.
Mm. Mm.
And you keep helping me so much.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Mm. Mm.
Hi, Trudy.
Hi, Rosemary.
Good to see you. Thank you. This home thing, focus, place, um is was really hitting me while you're speaking. And yeah. So lately I was feeling raw, something you were saying about finding this day-to-dayness that was really smooth and okay. And then Lori gave her running away talk, and that where, of course, I found something that, oh, yes. And then, which is okay, as long as it doesn't become a project, which, a self-improvement project, which, and then she gave a talk on clinging. And then now there's your talk on home. And what I'm finding is, or just trying to be with these aspects,
Mm.
things that I find in the talks, and yeah, not feel that, oh, something to work on, like a project. Of course, we're working with these things that we discover, but and the clinging thing that I found was this pressure, internal pressure to the fixer in me, this identity, and it's so powerful. And I think while you were talking about home, I thought, wow, it's probably motivated by a worry, not a worry, but just not really feeling at home
Mm.
with me. And I can, oh, I can figure things out. Give me a problem, I can figure out what to do. And it's really hard to, it's such a comfort zone, I guess.
Mm.
So thank you for this topic, and try to keep it with me without adding another project to myself. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that self-improvement. Well, it's the perfectionistic part, I guess. It's all of that.
Yeah, I think it's that real blessing and curse place, isn't it? It's made you who you are, which is gorgeous, and You know, the part that wants to live more fully and wholeheartedly and more freedom and less suffering. And it doesn't quite know how to do it without always hooking into it being a project it can achieve.
Exactly.
And I think that there's something. I was reading another book recently, and there was a phrase in it which is, "There's no perfection in this samsara," and that's been really with me. Which is, you know, the absolute pointlessness of thinking we're going to do this thing. Because if the thing is going to do, it's going to do it itself. It's nothing to do with us. But it's kind of like, yeah, befriending the part of you that wants to do that, and helping it cope with the disappointment.
One of the thoughts that I had during your talk was, well, running away and doing and fixing could keep me from the disappointment of maybe finding home and losing it, something like that.
Yeah. Ooh.
Like, just stay away from that.
Yeah, a kind of busyness from the
Yeah.
real,
Yeah.
maybe the real heartache of finding home, and that too is impermanent. That's why we need to borrow each other's courage, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate yours. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to lend you some.
Thank you.
Mm.
Okay, Bridget has her hand up, and here she is.
I know this will be the lightning round, but I can't thank you enough, Trudy, for what you've offered us today. And I'm curious, a very big change in my life came when I moved from a small West Texas town to a bigger city in Texas. But my mother had always felt misplaced in Texas because she had been brought to this state from Northern California. I'm curious if your mother ever returned to the South or closer to London, so she
She
remained there.
she remained a sullen northerner.
Well, my mother remained much of a southern, a Texas, trying to adapt, but had said it took her 23 years to adjust to most of it, and they
Yeah.
moved back closer to California, but she died at the age of 53. So I I really like your idea of creating this, coming back to the stillness and the home within ourselves and without ourselves, so that it's all one. I just want to push gratitude. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Yeah. It, one of the blisses of giving a talk is the opportunity to look with a different perspective, and I've certainly been feeling a lot of compassion for my mother, who was a sullen and unhappy northerner for the rest of her life, and never went back to London, and also found London, when she did go back to visit, not home anymore. So that sense of the displacement, the really profound displacement that can happen for us. And how do we find home in that displaced place? So how do we offer home to others as well from the displaced place? So, Just put you back on gallery view so I can just sit with you all together for the next few minutes. We'll just finish all together by saying 4 practice principles. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Thank you all for giving your time and attention and energy, and hand over to Ed, who's going to be offering the porch for the after talk meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Trudy. Just marvelous talk. And I just want to remind everybody that Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity, and your support makes a huge, huge difference. There is a link to make a contribution at the website, or appamada.org, and you can contribute. And as Trudy said, if you'd like to continue to meet, share, or just simply connect, just stay with us here online, pop yourself into gallery view, and we have another 30 minutes to be with each other. So thank you, and I will see you in a moment.